Hey everybody, HMV here, playing more Kerbal Space Program, and today we are launching Eve Gilly, which is taking Val up to Eve. And she's bringing a drop probe for an Eve landing, and her main pod is obviously curbed, and that is the Gilly land and return mission. So we're ideally going to get 2 more unlocks. We're going to be able to unlock 2 different buildings, and I don't know which ones I want yet, but we'll see what I end up doing. You see here on the probe, we've got a simple core, big heat shield, because we've learned that the little one doesn't actually do anything, and a single solar panel just for power. What you don't see is a parachute. I'm hoping to the thick atmosphere of Eve is going to slow the probe down enough to survive the landing, and the heat shield will ideally take the brunt of that landing. I have no idea if that's going to work. We'll find out when we get to Eve. Unlike with Duna, I don't actually know when to burn down to Eve just by looking at the map, so I just go for it. I figure, why not do it right now? And as I do my mid-course correction here, you will see how wrong I was. Oh well, let's just do a few orbits to get a better encounter. Okay, there's one we can work with. Just a little prograin burn here to nail the encounter, and then a little more to get a really good periapsis. And here I'm doing a simulation, we'll call it, to determine how much the probe's periapsis changes when I disconnect it, because we're so far away, it changes by kilometers. It looks like here it goes up about 15 kilometers, so I need to be 15 kilometers below where I want the probe to be when I disconnect. I want it to be at 85, so I'm sending it to about 70. That should be perfect, and we decouple, and 84.7. That should work fine. I previously have tested Eve, and 80 is way too low. That's why I decided to go for 85. Now, though, I need to burn my main ship up away from Eve, because its goal is Gilly. And as the Eve program comes down, I notice the first problem. It's out of power. The solar panel is aimed away from the sun. It's not really a problem, though, because the heat shield happened to luckily be aimed in such a way that it'll have its it'll be in the brunt of the force, and then aerodynamics should take over and take care of the rest. But I seem to have overestimated drag at Eve by a pretty large factor. Oops. Oh well, what's one more lost probe? And by the way, you don't need to comment. I realized later that actually I realized during this that that probe wouldn't have been controllable anyway, because it is too far out of comms range. It's still something I'm not used to because I haven't played very much Kerbal Space Program since the comms update. But the important part here is the Gilly landing, because that's not a probe, that's got a Kerbal, and that Kerbal is our last pilot because Jeb is sitting on Duna right now. So I time warp just past the next encounter marker so that I can see when the next orbit will be, and then I burn retrograde until my orbit closes. And those markers all seem to be coming together pretty nice. But still, it took quite a bit of fiddling. Gilly is hard to get to, especially without maneuver nodes. But we finally did get an encounter. This here looks like a pretty nice slopey slope to land on. Landing on Gilly is it's more like rendezvousing with an asteroid, really, than landing on a planet. But we do manage it all the same. And ding, another unlock. I still don't know what I want right now, so I'm going to save it until we're home, and then we're deciding what we're doing next. Which I start burning for right away, because I happen to be near Eve's periapsis, and that periapsis around Eve happened to be just about the right place to eject back to Kerbin. I'm a bit low on fuel, and I don't really have a choice, so I'm going to have to fix my solar tilt if I have any chance to ever get home. And it turns out on our very next orbit, we get about as close as we can expect, so we're going to use the last of our fuel to not get an encounter before we run out. Oh well. All that does is it decides my next unlock, which is going to be the astronaut complex, so that now Val can go EVA, grab all the science out of that ship, and go home the way only a Kerbal can, on monoprop EVA fuel. She does manage to get an encounter, and she also manages to bring down her periapsis to a point where I should be able to connect to her with another probe. Although maybe not that far, Val. There, that's better. Now all we need to do is pretend she's an asteroid and meet her in orbit. So meet the Val Getter 1. It is a simple ship with a simple mission. For some reason, I never get sick of watching drop stages fall away on ascent. This is actually a pretty simple mission. It's time sensitive, but other than that, it's nothing I haven't done before. So now that Val's within Kerbin's SOI, all we need to do is burn prograde to get the rescue ship going decent speed, and also set up so that they both arrive at Periapsis at the same time. Here we go. There. And there she is, our intrepid explorer. Rendezvous achieved. And after a very long time in space, Val is on board. So all we need is a quick burn down at Periapsis, and we are ready to re-enter. The rest of this is pretty much normal, and Val lands with no problems. Sadly, we don't get it unlocked, though, because we had to use ours to unlock the astronaut complex. It's going to be nice to be able to go EVA, plant flags, and all that good stuff. But honestly, I think I'd rather have gotten R&D or the VAB. Oh well, maybe next time. And by next time, I of course mean this time, because now that I can send larger things, I think I have what it takes to not just save Jeb from Duna, but to nail the Ike landing and the Duna return. But first, we've got to get Jeb back into space. And before that, we should get all the science we can from Duna. Oh, and plant a flag, just for fun. But anyway, let's go. And run out of fuel, not quite in orbit. No worries, that's part of the plan. Hop on out, Jeb, and get yourself into orbit. Oh, and I should mention, I broke down and installed Kerbal Engineer so I could, at least some of the time, not be in map mode. Also, I want Delta V stats in the VAB. I'm not going to use them in flight, but I do want them in the VAB. I just can't go interplanetary without knowing my Delta V, and I'm not going to do the calculations myself. Anyway, there we go. Now we just need to wait a few years until Val can come out and pick you up. And the launch of the Jeb Rescue 1, hopefully not just the first, but the only of its kind. Let's lose those pesky SRBs. Boom. And ditch the fairings to reveal the main ship. It's pretty simple. Large transfer stage that will also land on Ike, and a new Duna lander to go down and back up with full fuel tanks this time. It does take a little fiddling to get an encounter with Duna, but I do eventually nail it. And I even get really close to Jeb's orbit. This is going to be a breeze. Who needs maneuver nodes? A few hundred days later, and Val gets into orbit. And burns down so she can get a really nice encounter with Jeb. Hey Jeb, did you miss us? And Gravity? Back on board, I disconnect the two ships. Val's going to go down to Duna as she's never been there, and Jeb will go to Ike because, hey, someone has to. And as he takes off, he waves to Val as she passes by. Let's make sure it's not several years between meetups this time, shall we, Val? My timing is terrible, so Jeb will have to burn prograde at Apoapsis to get his Ike encounter. But the landing goes off without a hitch, except I laid the ship on its side so Jeb could get out and plant his flag, and then I couldn't write it again. I have tried just thrusting before, and that's never worked. The ship always blows up. So I figured I'd try something new. Let's spin. It kind of works, kind of, but I do end up on my top instead of my engine, and I just can't flip it over that way. So let's try it again, shall we? And there we go. And go, 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 Jeb, just like NASA would do it. And now it's Val's turn. Her drogues trigger, and her main chutes, I have to tweak them so that they'll go. And she lands with, as always, a little fuel spent. Then we toss the chute off the top, plant her flag, and back to space. The mission plan, which I totally am not making up as I go along, is for Val to take the Duna ship to Ike to meet with Jeb. Mostly because her ship is lighter, and I figure it'll waste less fuel. But really, I don't know. It just seemed like the right thing to do. And once again, Val burns to meet Jeb on the next orbit. And once again, they actually meet on the next orbit. But this time, it's actually part of the original mission plan. And it's to dock the two ships together. And again, following the totally thought out ahead of time mission plan, I realized that the total amount of fuel left in the ships is just about enough to totally fill the smaller tank. So I head back to the Space Center for my Ike upgrade. R&D. There we go. I knew it was one of these buildings. That's the Ike unlock. We can't do the Duna unlock until we actually return from Duna, but we do get an unlock for Ike, so this is fair. Now we can do fuel transfers, so we fill up the smaller ship, toss away the empty larger tank in such a way that it will crash into Ike, Realize, again, totally in line with the preordained mission plan, that our Ike orbit happens to be set up in such a way that returning to Kerbin directly from there will be easy to do, and we burn for home. Here I'm tilting slightly north and south to keep my sun orbit as close to Kerbin's tilt as possible. And of course, Kerbin is going to be exactly on the opposite side of the sun when we arrive at its orbit. But that's all part of the mission plan that I have been vehemently stating was all set down well before launch. And as you can see, on our next orbit, we will almost perfectly encounter Kerbin. By now, these kinds of burns are second nature, and we nail a nice close approach just under Kerbin's south pole. And I figured, why not come in and land that way, just for funsies? As always, we burn up the last of our fuel to slow down as much as possible while not letting our periapsis get too high or too low, and the resultant orbit is downright sedate for a return from Duna. What re-entry would be complete without a big explosion? This was just Jeb's solar panel, which we don't really need because Val's got one. And I realize here that by coming in polar along a trajectory that was parallel to Kerbin's path around the sun, we are guaranteed that we'd have sunlight all through our descent, which isn't actually strictly necessary because the ship is stable, though it is nice to have power here so I can get a bit more drag on descent, and then the chutes can pop. And a peaceful, sedate splashdown to complete the mission. I disconnect the ships in the water to recover them separately, so we get the recovery from Ike, and then we get the recovery from Duna, and now we get another unlock. I have been waiting for this one. Yes, the VAB. Now we can have a lot more parts and a lot bigger ships. Effectively, we're unlimited. 255 parts is a lot. And with a larger launch pad, the next missions should go swimmingly. We've even got enough breathing room that I'm again considering the idea, next time, of getting maneuver nodes. But, as I said, that's next time. This time is done. I hope you enjoyed watching this. I definitely enjoyed playing it. I'm HMV, and I will, as always, talk at you later.